We're in the midst of Ayin Gimel Amid Beis, 73b. The Mishnah had said various scenarios of courtyards that are open to each other and open to the street. And the participants made an Eruv in the courtyards, but not in the street. Or they made an Eruv in the courtyards and the street, but someone forgot to participate in one of them. And the first version is that they participated in the Eruv, but someone forgot to participate in the street. Or they participated in the street, but someone forgot to participate in the Eruv. So there are various halachas in this Mishnah, and the Gemara is saying that it seems like part of the Mishnah is according to Rabbi Meir, and part is not like Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Meir that we saw earlier that said that you need an Eruv both in the courtyard as well as in the alleyway. If you have everybody join their meals in the courtyard, but not in the alleyway, so then you can only carry in the courtyard. If they did so in the alleyway, but not in the courtyard, so then you couldn't carry from the house to the courtyard because you need both. So the first part of the Mishnah said that if they participated in an Eruv in the courtyards, but not in the alleyway, you can carry in the courtyards, but not the alleyway, which clearly seems like Rabbi Meir's opinion. And then it says if they made a participation in the alleyway, which the Gemara interpreted to mean also the alleyway, so then you can carry both places, and that would be in accordance with Rabbi Meir. If they made an Eruv in the courtyard as well as in the alleyway, however, one person forgot to participate in the courtyards, Eruv, when normally we would say that that person invalidates the Eruv on behalf of everybody because he didn't participate. So in the Mishnah it says they can carry in both places, and that's what we're up to. The Gemara says, "Wait, what's going on? Did this person relinquish their rights? So then, of course, they can carry. If they did not relinquish the rights to their space in the courtyard, well, that would invalidate the Eruv. So why does it say that everybody can carry in both places? Furthermore, in the next part of the Mishnah, it says if everybody participated in the Eruv in the alleyways, but somebody forgot to participate in the mavoi, so there it says that they're allowed to carry in the courtyards, but not in the mavoi, not in the alleyway. What happened over there? What's the change? If did they relinquish or not? So the Gemara proposes that perhaps what happened is that this fellow relinquished the rights. However, it doesn't work to relinquish your rights in the alleyway. To which the Gemara says that too is not true, because Rabbi Meir explicitly says that that you may, and it works to relinquish your rights in the alleyway. So if this person forgot to participate in the bread of the courtyard or in the meal of the alleyway, either one should be invalid on account of him not relinquishing. Must be that he relinquished. So then either way it should be valid because he relinquished. Why does it make a distinction here and say that if he relinquished, it's going to be why doesn't it say in the alleyway it's going to be okay? In the courtyard, if he forgot to participate in the courtyard, there everybody can still carry in the courtyard and the alleyway. But if you forgot to participate in the alleyway, no one can carry that. It invalidates it, and you can only carry in the courtyards and not in the alleyway. So Gemara says Ela Pshita, and this is in the middle of the daf, parallel to Tosfos Kol Shituf, the word Kol. So Ela Pshita delay batel. So must be he did not relinquish his rights to, and he forgot to participate in the Eruv in the alleyway, and he forgot to participate in the Eruv in the courtyard, and yet in the courtyard it's not going to invalidate it, and in the alleyway it will invalidate it. What's the reason? And if the end he didn't participate, he didn't relinquish, so too in the beginning he didn't relinquish. Which seems that Reish of a Sefer Rabbi Meir, Mitzvah Rabbanan, that the middle is the Rabbanan, while the first and last part of the Mishnah is an opinion of Rabbi Meir, and that would be very odd. So Gemara says you're right. Kula Rabbi Meir, it's all Rabbi Meir. However, we learned what was the reason that Rabbi Meir said that even though you participated in the Eruv in the alleyway, and all the members of all the courtyards in this alleyway participated, so essentially that should be the Eruv for the entire neighborhood, for the entire street. Nevertheless, it doesn't count as an Eruv unless you also participate in an Eruv for the courtyards. What's the reason? And Rabbi Meir explained, because otherwise you're going to forget the concept of a courtyard Eruv. So you can't only have an Eruv in the street for the community. Each courtyard itself needs an Eruv. What's the reason that Rabbi Meir said you need an Eruv, an Eruv, and shituf? You need both an Eruv for the courtyard and the partnership of the alleyway. Not to have the children forget the concept of Eruv. They're going to grow up without ever making an Eruv in the courtyard, and that's going to be a problem. But over here, you can't say that that's a problem, because all the courtyards made an Eruv besides for one person in one of the courtyards of this street. And but that person did participate in the Eruv of the alleyway. Therefore, it's going to be valid. So nobody's going to forget, the children will not forget the concept of an Eruv if one person forgets. However, if they forget the Eruv to join in the meal in the street, that's not going to work, because that requires a proper Eruv, because that is the unifier space for the street. And Rabbi Meir holds that everybody participating, all the members of the street participating in an Eruv for the courtyards is not sufficient to count as the street as well. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Leitani Psucha Zulazu. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav that in our Mishnah, even though we define the case in our Mishnah that there are five courtyards with multiple houses in each courtyard, five courtyards that are each open both to the street as well as to each other. So each courtyard has an opening between its neighbor as well as open to the street. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav that no, they're not open to each other. They're only open to the street. And Rav Kahana said similarly that Rav did not say that they are open to each other. He taught the case that they are only open to the street. Some say Rav Kahana himself was the one that said that the Mishnahs are talking about that they're open to each other. Abaye asked Rav Yosef, what's the reason that they would exclude that part of the Mishnah and say, no, that's not the scenario. The scenario the Mishnah is talking about where they are not open to each other, they are only open to the street. Kasavar, because they are of the opinion, so he proposes over here that the reason is that Rav and Rav Kahana, they hold that in order for an Eruv to be valid, meaning that the meal that they join to be valid, it has to come from each one of the courtyards into the alleyway. Now, if all the courtyards are open to each other, they may never make it into the alleyway. And therefore, every shituf, every partnership of the alleyway has to be that they each one brought it from their own courtyard into the alleyway. Each courtyard's meals have to come in that way, and that's why he says it's invalid. That our scenario is not talking about where the alleyways are open to each other, because then they may just collect it all going from courtyard to courtyard, and there would be nothing coming from each courtyard into the alleyway, and that's a problem. So he challenged this from various halachas that we learned or we're going to learn, where it seems like you can make an Eruv just from one alleyway, from one courtyard into the alleyway on behalf of everyone else. So we asked the question from Esav Balabaisha, Shutuf L'Shchenov Zebe Yain, our previous Mishnah. Now we're speaking about somebody who already is a partner in a barrel of wine with neighbors, not for the intent of an Eruv, but they do have a partnership in a barrel of wine. Can that barrel of wine count as an Eruv, a joint meal for all of them? And we said that it does count. They don't have to make an Eruv. Now that barrel never made it from each courtyard into the alleyway. It's its own courtyard. It's its own in its own space. So Gemara says Hasam the Afke v'Aili. So there too, we're going to have to say, according to them, that the barrel was brought in through each one of the alleyways, members through each one of the courtyards, from the courtyard to the alleyway, and then back into the next courtyard, and back into the next courtyard. And Rashi says this is a very odd and unlikely response, especially since there was no intent of making an eruv. Right? That was the whole idea of that Mishnah of the wine. That originally their partnership was not with the intent of eruv. So why would he bring it into each alleyway and then bring it back out? Each courtyard and bring it back into the alleyway, and then the next courtyard and bring it to the alleyway. So this way, it was brought from each courtyard into the alleyway and would count as a membership in the alleyway. That's, as the Gemara eventually is going to say, is not really the meaning here. We ask also from Ketzad Mishtatfim B'Mavli, how do you make a partnership in a mavoi, which is going to be, which we'll see later in a couple of days. And there too, we say that the way you could do it is that you have a barrel of wine or oil or whatever it is that you're participating in, and you can actually gift it to each person or to each courtyard member, and that would be sufficient. And the Mishnah over there says that you can have somebody acquire it on behalf of them from you, and who's valid to acquire it from you on their behalf. So it tells us how to do that, and over there clearly it's one barrel of that's in remaining where it is. It doesn't go in from one alleyway to the other. So Gemara says, no, actually, Hasam Nami the Apke v'Aili. There too, they were brought in and out from each alleyway. Rabbi Tzvi Fischer asks over here, according to this interpretation, why do we need it to be acquired over there by someone else? If you bring it into each person's courtyard, that should be an acquisition for them as within there in any case.
If they have an eruv in the chutzner.
Let me just finish the question 1 second. Rabbi Tzvi Fischer asks if each person brings if this barrel is brought into each person's courtyard, so you've brought it in with the intent of gifting them a part of what's in this barrel. Why does the Mishnah over there say that somebody had to acquire it on behalf of each one of the neighbors? And you don't need to do that. You brought it into their courtyard, and that in and of itself is an acquisition on their behalf. So again, like Rashi said in the previous Mishnah and the interpretation, they brought it into each one. It's a shenui dechika. It's a very very unlikely and very implausible, non-plausible explanation of that Mishnah. So to here as well.
The eruv or the shituf in the mavoi is just to give them access to the Rishus HaRabim, so that they could carry in the passageway to the Rishus HaRabim. But if they have an eruv chatzeros, so they have complete freedom to go back and forth from each other's houses in the chutzner, and all that mavoi serves as is access to the Rishus HaRabim. So what if everybody puts their own barrel there? Then why do I care whether anybody else has access or not? I mean, it's a convenience that everybody doesn't have to schlep a barrel. I just schlep one barrel for everybody. But besides being a convenience, it's not really necessary.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm saying, what is the purpose of the shituf in the mavoi in the first place, except it's just a convenience for the other people who live in the chutzner?
I'm not sure I understand what.
If I put
I'm
my
not sure how
barrel,
you understand. Let me just go through what's going on.
let me ask it a little better.
Okay.
If I put my barrel in the mavoi, we saw before that establishes me in the mavoi. If I do that before Shabbos, then I can use the mavoi to carry.
No. Every partnership, it's like the courtyard. If not every member joined in the Eruv, nobody can carry.
So the mavoi belongs to everyone, so to speak. I can't just
The
say
alleyway, right? The alleyway, the mavoi belongs to everybody, and all members of all of the courtyards are members of that alleyway. It's like any cul-de-sac, any street, right? They belong to all the members, all the people who live on that street, and therefore, if it's a public way, it's a public space. In order for somebody to be able to carry from their house or their courtyard into that street, they'd have to make it a single entity so that you're not carrying into a public space. The way to make it a single entity is where all members join in a meal. And then you could carry. That's the last part of the Mishnah here.
What was it?
That was the last part of the Mishnah. Let's just read that last two lines of the Mishnah. If one member of the alleyway did not participate in the alleyway, even though they participate in the courtyards, they can carry in the courtyards, but cannot carry in the alleyway, because the alleyway relative to the courtyards is like the courtyards relative to the houses. Just like in the courtyards relative to the houses, every member has to participate. And if one member of the courtyard, one house in the courtyard did not participate, no one can carry. So too, if one courtyard or one member of the courtyards didn't participate in the alleyways, Eruv, no one can carry. And therefore, what they're doing is they bring out a barrel and they say, I'm gifting this to everybody in the alleyway, all the people that live in this alleyway. And they put this barrel in their courtyard. And now that courtyard becomes the single entity home for all the members of the street. And now everybody can carry in the street.
So what did we see before when I forget who it was, but he said to his sons, said, quick, put something in the courtyard so that the tzaduki or the whoever the whether zakusi or tzaduki, I don't remember, but so just go quick and preempted. So what did it help? How did it help? There
were two versions of that. One version said that he did it because he considered that person not Jewish, because of their disassociation from Shabbos, so they did not have a Shabbos space, and therefore they had acquired it from him. They had leased his space within the courtyard, and that's what they were doing. They were solidifying the lease, or they were solidifying the other way around, that he held that this person was a part of Shabbos, and therefore they had a Shabbos space, but they had relinquished their rights. And if and go ahead and solidify the relinquishment, because otherwise that they could come back, and if they brought their furniture out from the house into the courtyard, that would be considered that they reneged on the relinquishment. So that was going on over there by Rabbi Gamliel. But of course, every member of the courtyard has to either participate in the Eruv of the courtyard, and the same for the alleyway. Every member that lives on the alleyway has to participate in the Eruv of the alleyway or relinquish if they didn't. Maskef la Rabbi Baruch Hanan. Rabbi Baruch Hanan also asked, Elamiata, if that's the case that you have to bring it in and out of each alleyway, of each courtyard into the alleyway. Elamiata hikna le pas basali. If you gifted him bread from your basket, hachanami le'av shituf, would that not be partnership in the alleyway? And clearly, you didn't take it out. And if you tell me, yep, that wouldn't count as an Eruv, it's not true. But Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, who we're quoting, who says that it has to be brought into each alleyway, from each courtyard into the alleyway. But he said in the name of Rav, a group of people sitting together before Shabbos, and as Shabbos sets in, and they're eating, and Shabbos sets in, and they say, you know what, we have to make an Eruv before Shabbos comes in. Hapash ala shulchan, The bread that's already on the table from their meal, they can rely on that as a part of as being the meal that they are joining in the Eruv. Now there, the assumption is this is a host who's hosting people, and he's giving them bread, and the bread on the table there clearly did not go through each alley through each courtyard into the alleyway. And we say that it works even for the for partnership into the alleyway. And even though that some say that it's for the it works for the courtyard, some for the alleyway, that's not a disagreement. It depends on the scenario. If they're eating in the house, so that would work as an eruv for the courtyard, but it wouldn't work as an eruv for the street, because the street is not becoming the dwelling place. Rather, it's becoming like a courtyard, a large courtyard for the entire single entity community. If you're going to say that it's in a house, it can only work as a courtyard, where the courtyard's becoming the single usage of the membership of that house. In any case, so if they're all eating indoors, so that would join them in the eruv of the courtyard. And kama mesubim b'chatzer, if they're all sitting in the courtyard, that would and they're eating in their front yard, and they have a nice party going on, a meal, and they have bread on the table, that would count as their participation in the alleyway's joint meal. In any case, you see that it didn't have to go from each courtyard into the alleyway. So the Gemara is going to say that cannot be the meaning of Rav, why he says that there's no connection between the courtyards themselves, but they're only open to the alleyway and not to each neighbor. Ela time of the Rav, the kasava ein moving nitu belech v'koira achi babatim v'chatzeros pesuchan l'teichei. This is something else. The idea is, and we're going to see a lot about this now, this concept. At the beginning of the Masechta, we saw that an alleyway, and the way an alleyway becomes permissible to carry in there, is if it has either it has a 3 walls, so it's a cul-de-sac, and it has either a vertical post or horizontal post at its opening where it meets the public road, the public way. That's true, a specific rule for an alleyway, for a mavli. It's only going to be valid if it has the rules of a mavli. What defines the mavli, the alleyway, as an alleyway? It requires that it has at least chatzeros, 2 courtyards, and batim, and it has to have houses, multiple houses per courtyard. And without that, it's not going to count as a valid eruv. And therefore, Rav holds that if there's an opening between each between each courtyard to themselves, not only are they open to the alleyway, but they're also open to each other, then they count as one large courtyard. And so you don't have multiple courtyards in the alleyway. So it's a technical definition here that's going to be the issue. In order to count as an alleyway, it has to be defined as multiple courtyards in that alleyway. And if each one of the courtyards are open to each other, that counts as a single entity courtyard. And you don't have a definition of an alleyway, which means it wouldn't suffice to just have a vertical post or a horizontal post, a lechi or a kora at the front of that alleyway. So even though that nothing really changed in the structure of the street, there are all these courtyards, and each one of the courtyards has multiple inhabitants, but the opening between redefines it as a single unit, and that's not going to be sufficient. So the Gemara is going to now analyze this statement of Rav that he requires a lechi and kara, and Shmuel's disagreement, and what the halacha is. So Gufa, the body of this statement. Amar Rav. Rav said, a mavoi nitu b'lech v'kara, a mavoi, an alleyway, would not be permissible to carry within based on having a demarcation at the beginning of its opening to the public way, whether to Rishus Harabim, whether it's a vertical post, a lechi, or a horizontal post, a kara at the top. And now we're in Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph. You require both houses and courtyards open to it. And Rashi points out that we saw yesterday the concept of a father and son living in an alleyway, that they could also have a lechi and kura at its front, and Rav is going to disagree. Rav is going to hold it. No, they cannot. They cannot have a lechi kura at the front of the alleyway as sufficient demarcation on the front of it, because they count as a single entity, the father and son. Tosfos here has a lengthy discussion disagreeing with this Rashi, but that's what Rashi says, that Rav is going to disagree with this. And Rav requires that it has to have a halachic technical definition of 2 courtyards minimally and houses to those courtyards. However, Shmuel disagrees. You don't need 2 courtyards. Even if you have one house and the other side has 1 courtyard, that's going to be sufficient in order to define that in order to define it as an alleyway that you're allowed to participate in. So he says that it doesn't have to be that you have 2 courtyards facing each other minimally in each alleyway, and each one of the courtyards has at least 2 houses, which is going to define it as a courtyard and not just a home. Rather, he says that it can even be a courtyard and a house directly open to the mavoi on the other side, and that would count as a valid opening. Rabbi Yochanan says it actually doesn't even have to be a home that is now really livable. It could be a ruin that has fallen apart, since you could use it as someplace that you would bring stuff in, storage, whatever it is. So it's still standing enough that you can it's usable for that member. And that's open directly to the alleyway, and there's another courtyard open to the alleyway. That's going to be sufficient to count as a halachic alleyway, that just a vertical post at the front or horizontal post, a kura or lechi or kura, would be valid. Amar Abaye Rav Yosef. So Abaye asked Rav Yosef, that's what about if it doesn't have another dwelling space on the other side? But rather, this alleyway only has a single courtyard. On the other side of it, it has a path through a vineyard. Would Rabbi Yochanan say, since he doesn't require a proper dwelling space on the other side of the alleyway, so it's not 2 dwellings or a courtyard and a dwelling, like Shmuel requires, but rather he says even a ruin. What about if it just has a vineyard? Rabbi Yochanan only said it in a ruin, the chazi ladira, because there's some sort of dwelling aspect to it that it's livable in some case, and so therefore you have one side, you have a courtyard, on the other side you have a ruin, which has some ability to be considered a living space. That's going to count. But there's no living space in a vineyard. That's not going to count. Like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that a ruin is sufficient, Rabbi Yochanan follows his opinion elsewhere. The Tanan we learned. Rabbi Shimon says, Echad gagos ve'echad karfifas ve'echad chatzeros u'shus achas ein lekelim sheshav silutechan. We saw this earlier in the Masechta, and we see a few times this concept that according to Rabbi Shimon, the alleyway, the courtyard of a house, which is essentially the public use, a public use space that this homeowner association, that the group in this chutzner own, and they have rights to it, would be the same halacha as the other public spaces within that courtyard that they have rights to use, such as the storage area, the karfeif, the roof where they could go up and either store things or use it for sunbathing, who knows what, right? So the roofs, the storage areas, the courtyards, it's all one halachic space for Shabbos. So even though you're not allowed to carry from the house into the courtyard, but you are allowed to carry within the courtyard, so too you're allowed to carry from the courtyard to the roof, from the courtyard to the wood storage area, from the wood storage area to the roof, etc. It's all one space for all the vessels that were already in the courtyard at the onset of Shabbos. However, but you're not allowed to take something out of the house and bring it into the courtyard or into the carpet to the wood storage area or onto the roof. The house to these areas are separate space. And Rav said that Allah is like Rabbi Shimon, that all the courtyard and roof space count as one. But only if they didn't make an eruv. But if you did make an eruv, so now you're saying the house and the courtyard are one space. But if you did make an eruv, there we're afraid that you're going to take some vessels from the house and bring it out into the courtyard. And we're afraid that you're going to bring it not only to your own courtyard, but to the next courtyard, and that's going to be a problem because each eruv, you only made an eruv to yourself, to your own courtyard, and you're allowed to bring your vessels out to there, and then you may end up bringing the vessels from your house to the courtyard, which you're allowed to do because of your eruv, and you're going to bring it to the next courtyard or to the roof, and that's going to be a problem. So once you make an eruv for your own courtyard, you can no longer bring them from one courtyard to the next and from one courtyard to the roof. But Shmuel says, no, we're going to have no such concern. Bein irvu or bein lo irvu, regardless of whether you made an eruv, which now allows you to bring vessels from the house into the courtyard, or you didn't. Either way, you're allowed to bring vessels from a courtyard to courtyard, from courtyard to the roof, from the courtyard to the carpet to the wood storage area. And Rabbi Yochanan also said that you can bring it to whether you made an eruv or not. Even if you made an eruv, which means you're allowed to bring vessels from the house into the courtyard, it's going to be valid if to bring vessels from the courtyard that were at the onset of Shabbos in the courtyard to another courtyard, to the roof, to the wood storage area. And so to over here, you see that this ruin counts as a part of a courtyard, a dwelling space enough because people would store things there, and that's going to count as that space. So we see that he's not concerned that you're going to bring vessels from the house into the courtyard, into the next courtyard, through the alleyway, even though that it's a different space. So we see we're not concerned. We're not concerned about it. We're not concerned that you may bring vessels from the house into the courtyard and from the courtyard into the ruin, and that's why he says it counts as a valid participant in the mavui, in the alleyway, and it's going to be two entities in the alleyway, which is sufficient to count it as a alleyway that has multiple units, multiple courtyards, and you can use a vertical post lechi akara as a demarcation at the opening. Yosef Abruna v'kamal hashmaita. So Rav Bruna was repeating this teaching of Shmuel that says that you don't need two courtyards, and each one of the courtyards has to have multiple homes in it. It's sufficient to have one courtyard, one house directly open to the alleyway, and that's going to be sufficient. Amalei Rabbi Lezer Barbe Rav, student, meaning he called Rav Bruna, student who was repeating this teaching in the academy. Really? Amar Shmuel Hachi? Is this really the teaching that Shmuel said, that it's sufficient to just have a house open to the alleyway? Amalei said, yeah, that's what Shmuel said. Amalei Achvi Eshpize. Show me where he lives. I want to ask him if this is true. Achvi Le. So he showed him. Also, Lakami de Shmuel. He came before Shmuel and he asked him a question from his own teaching. Amar Mar Hachi. Did you really say that it's sufficient to have one courtyard and one house directly open to the courtyard? Amalei In said, yes, indeed, that is the teaching. But you are the one that taught, as general rule, that when it comes to Eruvin, we look at the wording of the Mishnah, and the wording of the Mishnah is going to tell us what the halacha is. And in the wording of the Mishnah, it says, our Mishnah says that the alleyway to its courtyards, plural, is like each courtyard is to each of the homes within the courtyard. Meaning you need to have multiple homes in a courtyard for it to count as a courtyard, and you need multiple courtyards in an alleyway for it to be designated as an alleyway, because it says chatzeiros, plural. Ishtik. Shmuel was silent. He didn't respond to that question. The Gemara asks, was he silent on account of that he accepted this or not? Kibla minei? Olo kibla minei. Did he accept this challenge and therefore reverse his opinion and say you need at least 2 courtyards? Or he said, no, 1 courtyard and 1 house is going to be sufficient. So how would we know? The Gemara is going to bring us a brisa a story that teaches us Shmuel's ruling in regards to a particular alleyway. This alleyway, the Havadayer Ba Avos Bar Ihu. Avos Bar Ihu lived in this alleyway, and Ovid Leilechia V'Shar Shmuel. All he did was he made the vertical post, the lechi, at the front of the alleyway, between the alley and the Rishus Harabim, and Shmuel said, "Oh, now you can carry." Now we don't know the scenario here, so we have to assume what Avos Bar Ihu was going on. Was it Avos there alone? Clearly not, because even Shmuel says you need multiple homes, you need a courtyard plus another house, and so that must be what was going on there. That was at least another dwelling space there. Asar Rav Anan Shadi, and once Shmuel passed away, Rav Anan, who was the son of Rav, removed that lechi and said, this is not a sufficient demarcation at the front over here. We have to remove it. And the Gemara thought at this point that Rav Anan removed it because his father disagreed with Shmuel, and he removed it because Shmuel's because he disagreed. Shmuel said that it's sufficient to just have 1 courtyard and 1 home and 1 house. And Rav said you need 2 courtyards. And so once Shmuel passed away, Rav Anan bar Rav removed it. So Amar Mavud the Yarna Be Vasina Mishmei Shmuel Naisi Rav Anan bar Rav and Shadye. And we'll remove it from here. He said, wait, this is an alleyway that I've been living in for all this time. And Shmuel came and ruled that it was good. Now Rav Anan removes the lechi and says it's not sufficient. That's inappropriate. Obviously, this was sufficient because it has a house and 1 dwelling place. So Gemara says, so we see that Shmuel did not accept this on account of that Shmuel allowed Avos Bar Ihu to live in this alleyway, with just 1 house and 1 courtyard. So Gemara says, really, Shmuel did accept it, and it required 2 courtyards. However, actually, this case was something else completely, and Avos Bar Ihu misunderstood the halachic basis for Shmuel's ruling. Shmuel didn't rule on account of 1 house and 1 courtyard, but rather within one of these, there was a house there. There was an open. The courtyard was open also to the shul, to the Beis HaKnesses, and because it was open to the Beis HaKnesses, the custodian of the shul, the chazna, would eat bread in his own house, but he would sleep in the shul in order to protect it and to make sure that everything was okay. So that was considered that he dwelt in that alleyway, as we know that we saw in yesterday's daf that Shmuel says makam lina, the place where you sleep, defines your participation. So this chazan, since he slept in the shul, that counted as another alleyway, as another dwelling space. And on the basis of that, Shmuel said that this has multiple alleyways and multiple courtyards to the alley, and that's why he accepted it, and that's why he allowed the Eruv. However, at this point, the chazan was no longer sleeping in the shul, and that was a mistake. For Avos Bar Ihu thought makam pitagar, he thought that can't be the reason that Shmuel accepted the Eruv, because after all, Eivas Bar-I knew Rav's opinion that wherever you eat counts as a participation, as your place for Shabbos, and where you need to participate in the Eruv. And this fella ate at home, so therefore he's not a part of the Eruv. However, Shmuel is of the opinion that if you eat in the wherever you sleep counts, as we saw the other day. Therefore, Shmuel considered the chazan, the custodian of the shul, to also be part of this courtyard, and that made it a proper courtyard and a proper alleyway, because this mavoi now had two courtyards, two chatzeros open to it. Shmuel followed his opinion that wherever you sleep counts as making the Eruv. Once the chazan was no longer living there, Rav Anan, the son of Rav, said, look, either way, Shmuel's opinion is no longer applicable here, because he doesn't sleep here. You cannot rely on this and remove the post, so that people not be mistaken and rely on it. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. The Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Mavoi should see the echad of kachavim and siva echad Yisrael. You have an alleyway, and there are only two houses or two courtyards, one on each side of the alleyway. One is a non-Jew, and one is a Jew. And as we said, that an alleyway, in order to be permissible, has to have two homes. However, this Jewish house has a flag lot, but that flag lot is not open to the alleyway. Rather, it's open on its side to the directly to the Rishus Harabim, to the public way. The two houses that are in the flag lot, back to back to the Jewish home in the alleyway, are not going to be allowed to make an Eruv through the windows that they have open to the courtyard or to the house of the Jew that is open to the alleyway. That's not going to be sufficient. And the reason is because, as we've seen before, one alleyway should not have just one Jew and one non-Jew. And therefore, they cannot permit that by joining in an Eruv with him. Did Rav say this even in a courtyard where the Jew and the non-Jew are living in one courtyard? And then these houses that are sort of the flag lot behind the Jewish home are open through windows to there. Yes, indeed. The Ilamar might have Amina, because if not, and he said that even if he didn't say that even in the Chatzar, you're not allowed to do so. Well, if that's the case, then it should just be on the basis of that you need two courtyards in any case. So if the Jew and the non-Jew are the only two members of the one courtyard that's there, then Rav anyhow doesn't say that it's a valid valid alleyway, because it doesn't have two courtyards. So then why would we need both of these teachings? Tomorrow we'll continue and get to the Mishnah. We didn't get there we're out of time. So tomorrow we'll continue with this explanation of Rav's case over here, where you have a Jew and a non-Jew in this alleyway.